So I teach at the University of Georgia. Welcome, thank you for coming. And I would like to thank Doc for having me, very much so. I've so enjoyed my time here, and like Karen said, I have enjoyed the exchange of conversation and observing the threads of conversation. I would ask for you, as we begin, to think about something, to engage you actively as we begin this presentation. Think for a moment, how do you witness, how do you view presentations such as these? How do you come to these? What do you like? What do you like about that? What do you look for? Okay? Just holding that thought. It might make more sense as I go. I wanted to say one other thing. I teach at the University of Georgia, and I teach modern contemporary technique, and I also teach dance pedagogy. And we do have a K-12 certification program there as well. Author Melinda Buckwalter says, improvisation is when we adapt our actions in the moment to meeting changing circumstances. As animals, human animals, we have thrived due to our ability to evolve and change, adapt in relation to our environment. I would like to appropriate this idea of improvisation as a way of adapting to change to the context of dance teachers, artists, and their dance pedagogy. As teachers, we hope to facilitate change in our students, and we also hope our practices will evolve over time. There are many challenges to transformation. Shifts in oneself and one's practices may require rethinking and redesigning, imagining something that does not exist yet, living in questions for an uncomfortable amount of time, courage, risk, sacrifice, and faith that you will reconstruct chaos into coherence at some point. As I find myself in the midst of many transformations, both long-term, acute, primarily in my teaching practices, but one which sees no boundaries or cubbies that separate life from art. Welcome. It feels uncomfortable at times, beautiful, a bit chaotic, and even a bit violent. This narrative will track my ongoing pedagogical improvisation in hopes that other teachers can glean insights about what is needed in reconstructing and transforming traditional paradigms in their teaching. A word about narratives. Authors Melanie Bales and Rebecca Nettle-Fuel state that collecting training stories and reflecting on changing training practices are steps towards an eventual and more comprehensive view of dance technique. These authors also call upon the need for insider knowledge from dancers to be culled and assimilated into the scholarly dialogue. These inside stories are also important from teachers. Teacher narratives of evolving practices would build an equally beneficial body of evidence towards documenting a larger narrative in this constant evolution. I've been inspired by the work of Jane Hawley, a professor at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. She describes her curriculum, Movement Fundamentals, as a training paradigm for dance in art and life. A personal practice for Hawley, still in the infancy stages of its application to other teachers, Movement Fundamentals is a somatic-based curriculum, but does not endorse or apply any specific somatic modalities, such as Alexander or Feldenkrais, but allows for each person to employ his or her own somatic approaches, including these, within the framework. As a contextual background, I base my evolving definition of what is entailed in working somatically on some of the following qualities, culled from personal experience and scholarly dialogues. I think these are things, as colleagues, we are all familiar with. Essentializing concepts of sensitivity, a slowed pace, to sense awareness, process-based experience, investigations of connectivity and initiation, allowing central nervous system's organizing role as self-organizing and regulating, and supporting diversity of orientation and experience. Here's some of the sources from it. Movement fundamentals consist of practices that implicitly acknowledge and support artistry and process. I'll just go to the Unfortunately, this short discussion does not allow for its complete explanation, as I'm interested in divulging my experience and application through Jane's work. In summary, in addition to the courses, in summarizing her curriculum, in addition to courses in contact improvisation, this holistic curriculum also includes dance composition, dance history, performance lab, and others, and articulates 6 paired principles that form the core courses. These are the 10 tenets from which sort of the largest framework that her curriculum involves. And instead of trying to encompass the complete paragraphs of them, they include these kinds of phrases such as self-reliance, observation. She uses the language of anatomy, the language of design, economic access in all abilities and ages that can access the work, etc. The 6 paired principles include practices, Movement Fundamentals 1, practices of alignment and function. Movement Fundamentals 2, practices of range and efficiency and range. Movement Fundamentals 3, practices of vocabulary and intention. These principles resonate out of the 10 larger tenets just aforementioned, and that are like philosophies of practice. Since 2001, Holly has honed and taught from this curriculum that flows with and beyond the theater/dance department, which she participates collaboratively. Lastly, Movement Fundamentals includes a defining practice called the 4 phases. It's an adaptable practice that aligns with the 6 principles, and it's for dancing and living, and I will draw upon it as my framework for the rest of this narrative. In its original format, it involves timed moving in each phase with a smaller proportion of timed writing. For example, you will move phase 1, and I will draw out each of these phases in detail. You'll move for 15 minutes and write for 5. And in phase 2, move for 15 minutes and write for 5. And so on through the 4 phases. Phase 1 is called preparing to move. Phase 2 is called moving. Phase 3 is called dancing. And phase 4, witnessing. You may have questions about those words. My experiences in this curriculum consist of 2 summer workshops, each a 6-day intensive, where we embodied, discussed, and lived into these practices and simultaneously reflected on them as teachers. My deepening understanding of this practice as an artist, teacher, dancer, mother, citizen has played out in the academic years between. What I find unique about Holly's curriculum is first that it is a curriculum, defined as a set of courses constituting an area of specialization. I prefer to look at curriculum making more like purposeful culling of pieces to form a coherent whole that reflects one's values, or like planning and preparing a really good meal. What I find unique is that it utilizes improvisation, including contact improvisation, as its only movement training structure. In her tiered levels, MF 1, 2, and 3, Holly refrains from teaching movement styles, genres, and teacher-driven vocabularies, except a few movement phrases used to help to hone awareness of alignment and efficiency, primarily in Movement Fundamentals 2. Movement Fundamentals favors a development from student to artist. The movement scores generated by students develop into short solo improvisations and group scores, and by level 3, longer solo improvisations. The following is a narrative that unpacks the 4 phases, while simultaneously narrating my own experience of changing practices from a very traditional-oriented to a more holistic somatic approach to teaching dance technique. Phase 1 asks, how do I begin? What is needed? What is important? My first dance experiences occurred when I was 14, taking part in the confirmation sacrament in our Catholic Church. Our priest invited 2 local, very mature modern dancers to our class to help us assemble a liturgical dance component to the ceremony. As a relatively sheltered teenager in a small Ohio River town, I actually enjoyed this new development process of becoming an adult in the church. It was through religion that I first encountered a validation of self-awareness and introspection. Through prayer, inner dialogue, and ritual, purposefulness and discipline, I was introduced to the idea that there was an extraordinary, sacred space that lay beyond the mundane. This was my preparation for dance and the mindfulness needed to pursue and engage in the art discipline. The dancers facilitated improvisation sessions with about 7 or 8 severely inexperienced and awkward teenagers, assisting us in discovering kinesthetic, expressive, and metaphorical aspects to this rite that reflected our individual experiences of it. I immediately fell in love with this process, and soon began taking classes with the adults at the Modern Dance Studio, and was performing with them within 3 months at the local mall. My non-traditional preparation set the intention for a rich and positive self-identity forming beginning to dance that, despite later challenges, remains. In Movement Fundamentals, Phase 1 alerts us to what is needed and important in order to prepare or align our body to a task, the environment, or a situation, and discernment of whether this environment is safe and supportive. I perceived both the church and the dance as safe and supportive. I could align myself with these practices and risk expanded ways of being. So what does it mean to be prepared, to prepare mindfully? I think of a kind of mise en place, or putting in place all the tools and ingredients that we need, which sets one up for a more fluid experience and enables efficiency of work. I often give lip service to this idea, but I frequently fail to take the time in preparing for everything from planning dinner, planning summer vacations, planning class, to retirement planning, and even the planning stages of writing this presentation. During Movement Fundamentals, Coalescence, which is the workshops I attended, one woman who had her 1.5-year-old daughter with her explained that her Phase 1 was her preparation to move was making sure her daughter's needs were met first. In changing my teaching practices, I aspire to procure more meaningful preparation, which impels a relationship with the doing. For to know what is needed emphasizes that we have a goal, a hope, a desire of what is to take place. Phase 2. Phase 2 asks, how do you move? What do you notice? What do you like to do? This phase alerts us to our customary ways of moving and thinking and revolves around efficiency and choice-making. Subsequently to my spiritual entree to dance, I was thrown into the professional world on very different tenets. My norm was navigating a traditionally minded modern dance company whose director enforced a hierarchical structure, created an environment of obedience both on and off the stage. Although the work itself was potent, the range allowed within this company experience was quite narrow. We were not allowed to take any other dance classes. No modern classes, no ballet classes, no yoga classes. The director supported us seeing art and performances, yet mostly those that he approved of. Ingrained habits tend to reduce sensitivity. The habits I developed over 5 years at this dance company led to a significantly decreased awareness of body sensation, my body's needs and efforts towards achieving equanimity, and therefore my work to achieve balance became far from efficient. I suffered through the inefficiencies of an obedient body, preparation steeped in fear, working through pain, a restrictive diet, all of which degraded my sense of self and my confidence, both in my dancing and my belief that if I ever left this situation, I would contribute anything worthwhile. This phase of practice asks us to put new conscious attention on our customary ways and may involve adjustment to suit our changing ideas and beliefs. Although the roots of resistance to change go deep in the habits habits are by nature automated, I eventually realized the courage I needed to claim myself and to increase my range by venturing on from this company and began to examine my practices in a new light. Currently, as a teacher, I no longer subscribe to the traditional means of training dancers. I have broken apart but have not able to leave altogether old patterns of teaching, my material and technique class, and I think that if I arrive at transforming the class to my satisfaction, I will have to give it a new name because technique as a descriptor no longer holds meaning. movement practices. I prioritize open structures rather than prescriptions, using primarily developmental patterning as basis for the warming up to hone efficiency. I also use imagery, metaphor, and discovery learning with material through improv and manipulated movement as part of class practices, and find that working in these multiple ways, invoking freedom of choice from students, has improved my range and efficiency as well as theirs. I've applied learning scores, which begin many classes where we improvisationally explore a concept that has a great universal, like a metaphor, such as expression, reception, or boundaries and choice making, or variability, which then becomes the weekly theme to push against throughout our other work. Phase 3 asks the question, how are you dancing? What do you think about? What do you imagine? Now we're dancing. We're expressing. Phase 3 alerts us to expression. What is it we have to say about our experience and the world around us? We begin to understand how intentions, or what we think about, shape our vocabulary, or what we say and how we take action. However my teaching practices evolve in the freedom of my class, they still must exist within the established curricular network at my home department. This challenge is becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Yet this is a likely universal challenge that departments face working as little ecological communities, as change in any one part affects the whole, and change can be expected. So there lies the challenge. For example, I've been trying to alter, excise, marginalize, rename, and disguise or reframe the juried performance exams required of our department. This kind of focus on physical skills and albeit bodily connections and artistic merit feels so very ill-aligned with the kind of work that I've been developing for some time now. I've instead asked students to take part in the 4 phases practice in one class period, writing after each phase. Then go away and write a paragraph about their experiences in each phase, using that full class's improvisation and documentation as embodied data for reflecting on their class progress as a whole over the semester. I include writing, other kinds of writing, site-specific explorations. I allow them to create material and manipulate given material, and I'm inching my way towards further changes. Phase 4, practices of artistry, dance, viewing. The question I asked you. How are you watching? What do you look for? In this phase, we are asked to be mindful of how we view our students and to be co-participants within the community. Somatic movement educator and scholar and teacher, Dr. Martha Eddy, articulates that the introspection that characterized somatic work in the past is no longer sufficient given our awareness of global issues, and that a new expanded format is needed that models community-mindedness. As a teacher, I'm now finding it pertinent and relevant to embrace a wider community of learners, to reach my community, to address needs. I've invited retired artists to contribute to my dancers through workshops. I've established a community dance day at our department. I teach first-year seminars that integrate ideas of dance with life skills, such as mentorship and collaboration. I hold monthly improv nights with peer improvisers in the community. My viewfinder has changed its focus and the aperture is widened to more actively embrace myself inside the community. How will this improvisational score I've created conclude or resolve? Well, the score is ongoing. The holism of somatic approaches and of incorporating such approaches as a sequence of study presents challenges within the culture of dance departments. Do I teach movement fundamentals curriculum? No, not as a whole. Do I engage in its principles? Yes. I try to live and create mindfully, and the 4 phases helps me to do that in and beyond dance. So range and efficiency, as Jane says, in your kitchen. If you live in a small apartment, the range is small, and be efficient. That kind of thing. I teach through alignment and function, efficiency and range, vocabulary and intention. I think this organization of these familiar concepts is a useful aspect They offer a blend of structure and freedom and have helped to define what teaching somatically entails. I can structure a myriad of practices around them. This curriculum offers one kind of blueprint, perhaps of many future plans for transformative teaching. Yesterday, Maven and Christina reminded us that when we face crisis, we are forced to dig deeply and make choices. I realize that I may have curiously overlooked that valuable idea in terms of change, not just adapting to change, accommodating change, but as in phase 2 and 3, I can construct change. I cannot always control the perturbations that incite it, but I can actively shape and mold the effects and the path through constructing and choosing. Improviser Katie Duck emphasizes her preference for choosing well, improvisation as culling and curating over generating of material. This, she claims, requires mindful presentness. As an improviser, I can construct change, not only respond to it. Every day I teach, I am determined to commit to practices I believe in. I can get in there, use the hammer and chisel, tear down the wallpaper, tear the house up, and reconstruct it and rebuild it. I must envision the desired end. What kind of dancer am I training? What do I want her or him to look like? To be? What kind of teacher? What kind of teacher do I want to look like? To be? What kind of person? Draw it, dance it, embody it, teach to it. And so it goes in the field of dance pedagogy. As a community of practitioners in our improvisation, we can collectively respond to changing circumstances and adapt and also reconstruct and collectively break with old habits, create new curricula, use professional meetings and organizations to express new ideas and witness each other and share our best practices in creative and scholarly research. Collectively, we can envision the changes we want. We need to see ourselves as part of a community and actively engage in such. I will conclude with Wendell Beaver's quote from Wendell Beavers about his own wrestling with what dance technique is. As a teacher, I try not to forget that each dancer will ultimately have to create his or her own technique. They will have to create their own lineage from their own selective view of history. Most essentially, they will have to reinvent dance. They will have to go through dance's evolutionary stages in their own developmental style. The sum of this experience will be who they are as artists.
Thank you very much. Now, questions. Yes.
I'm always curious, thank you for very stimulating presentation. And I'm always curious about numbering, and particularly with the word phase, that when we get a number system, we're imprinting an idea of sequence. And so to sequence those things in that order, those words, there's an implication that that's the order in which these things correctly happen.
Absolutely.
And so I'm curious if you believe that, so that witnessing would not come first, or that dancing would not come secondly. Is that the implication?
To try to speak for Jane's work and my experience of it, the logic is from inside to outside. So from preparing to move in a class, preparing for a performance, preparing for your day's movement, to moving, finding, playing, experimenting, to then crafting, dancing, improvising, and then that last stage. And I would love you to have that discussion with Jane, but I'm here to, so my take on it is that viewing is phase 4 to say, then in phase 4, you actually split your group in half, and half dances and half watches. So what is it like to engage in those two ideas as a viewer and a dancer? What is it like to view the dance? What do you like to view in terms of that person crafting expression? And then dancer, how do I like to dance knowing there's someone viewing my crafting of expression? So in that way it has a logic of moving through a dance class, or through life, but there's a...
So I guess my dangling question is just a provocation that we consider what those words mean.
Yeah.
And if there is indeed a logic, if we're talking about art and bodies and minds, or if in fact there is a more fluid way of considering things like witness.
Sort of modular way of saying,
and
these are
that
4
when
words, put them
and
together.
And when we set out words like phase and number, we're implying something that we should continue to question whether that is true.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that back.
Okay. Everything was so clear.
I
Yes?
have a question, because you talked about Jane's curriculum. I was just curious, for your students at your university, what does the rest of their curriculum look like besides what you teach?
Yeah, we have,
What is their whole picture?
their whole picture is ballet and modern every day, every week. Yeah, 2 ballet faculty, 2 contemporary modern faculty. And then a jazz that swings in and out through the weeks. Like they could take it, but they don't have to have it every semester, and it's only 1 day a week. So that's...
So how's your work then, how do you see that in relation to a much more traditional?
That's sort of where I was saying the challenges of sort of a whole, somatic is a holistic way, and then working that way is holistic. So I'm trying to figure out how look at the student's experience. They come into one class, they're told one thing, they go into another class. How is that productive? And if I'm not able to just go, oh, I don't want to be here anymore, I'm going to leave, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can start my own department. The world doesn't work that way. My life is not set up that way. So I think, okay, how do I work with what I have? I was having a discussion with someone about working in the soft places. So working through here's the courses. I can't change what courses they take right now, although over time we can do that if we get consensus. But I can work in the choreographic works. I can work with Community Dance Day. I can work between the courses and work on community building and take them on field trips. And we take them to museums now in technique class. I take them to a museum every semester so that we can sort of pull in the larger world. So if that's an answer, soft places and bumping and introspection.
Yes. I think these really powerful issues you've compressed into
20 minutes.
one. It's really quite it's very compelling. Thinking about how our dance practices both turn the skin and turns out moving out into the community, those kinds of practices I'm also very interested in. And you also brought up this sort of perplexed issue of the examination. I think I heard that. I know, which is this moment when we have to measure what they've learned, what they've inculcated, what they might do in the future, and to rate our students, especially in the context of something where we're I believe, at least I'm trying to teach something that's beyond measure. That has value without being part of that logic system Jessica was referring to. One of the ways that, and I mentioned this yesterday, one of the ways that I've tried to, because I hate examinations, absolutely hate them. I do terribly on them, so I don't want the students to have to go into that kind of situation either. One of the ways is to try to intervene in that process by giving the students a bit more agency and to respond and to talk back to the examination. I'm wondering how you do then examine this kind of thing.
Oh, well, Jane Hawley does consensus grading in her classes. That was one of my questions to her when I was there. It's like, okay, how do you, how are we going to integrate that? She does consensus grading, so they have a conference and they talk, and I don't have the time to go into nor do I know if I could rattle off the comprehensive requirements in the class, but they do include writing, they include projects and anatomy projects, sort of anatomy study is sort of enfolded in there. So there are investigate. There's always a research question, but that's consensus grading for that. I just use a rubric and I try to engage their input into the material, and then I ask them to reflect on things and their written reflection of different ways to get their take on their process, to validate that inner dialogue and development, and also to see what they think they're doing. I haven't gotten anywhere where I'm pleased yet.
Can I just ask
a short question?
Yes. Sure. How does your students relate to this practice? or to this you're doing, in combination of this more traditional, contemporary, and that?
Short answer.
Yes?
Yeah.
Foundational students, very enthusiastic, kind of
Yeah.
all over the place, but very enthusiastic. And then the majors level beginning, not so kind of clueless. And as we go up, very interested.
Yeah, great.
Thank you so much.
Could you move to another space?
Okay.